So today I want to talk with you about the love of God. And we don't have any idea how huge the love of God is, how powerful, how strong it is, how long it is. God's love for you stretches all the way back from before the creation. You see, before the creation? I thought you were going to say from the creation. No, it stretches all the way back from before the creation. Because remember, that Christ was chosen from before the foundations of the earth. Yeah. The apostles were chosen from before the foundations of the earth. The plan of salvation was laid out before the foundations of the earth. God set the plan for his chosen ones and what that choosing would be. So when you are saved and enter into that, you are among the chosen, the selected ones, literally. But God's love for you stretches from before the beginning of the world, at least to the end of your life. And it's up to you as to whether it's going to stretch further. Will it or won't it? God leaves that up to you. Imagine that. However long the earth has been here, we can debate that if you want, but it doesn't matter. Whether you're a young earther and it's 6,000 years or you're an astrophysicist and it's billions of years. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's much bigger than any of us can imagine. Can you imagine what 1,000 years is? You can't. 2,000? 5,000? 6,000? No, you have no concept of that. You can't imagine that amount of time that spans so many lives. There's no way. And God's love stretches all the way across all of that. His love for you. I'm not talking for other people, I'm talking about for you. Because all of this was created and put in place before you came into existence. Including the plan, including the apostles, including Christ. All of that was before. Christ's ministry, Christ's death and crucifixion, his resurrection, his ascension, Pentecost, the church, everything. Everything was put into place before you got here that came before you. God's love stretches all the way across all of that because he had to put all of that in place before you came into existence. And then up until the end of your life, at least. Wow, I mean, that's amazing. That's absolutely astounding. But now let's flip it. Let's ask, how big is your love for Jesus Christ? After all, it was because of Jesus Christ you were saved. It was on Jesus' name and in his blood that you were saved. You have some gratitude towards him, I imagine. But is that gratitude shallow? Or is it so deep that you don't have any idea how deep it is? There's a big difference. How big, how deep is your love for Jesus Christ? I'm going to test it here. When you sin, every time you sin, you add to the suffering of Christ on the cross. How long did he spend on the cross? Every second that he spent on the cross was for the sin of people, individuals like yourself. Every time you sin, you add to those seconds that he spent on the cross suffering in his crucifixion, in anguish, unjustly. Your sin caused him to suffer unjustly. You say, but Ron, I didn't nail Jesus to the cross. I didn't vote for him to be nailed to the cross. But he still went to the cross because of your sin. And so you still have life left, which means you still have days left, which means you still have occasions left, bundles of events called occasions, in which you can exercise your mind in its fortitude, its strength to not sin and do what's right. But every time that you give in to that and you sin, you make sure that Christ is held there by those nails seconds longer, minutes longer. And the anguish and suffering that he bears is extended by every sin that you commit. But Ron, no, I reject that. If you reject that, it means that you don't love Christ. Because you would empathize with what he went through and why he went through it and how that is your personal responsibility. When I was in Poland doing missions work there, in the Polish Catholic Church, they would have a prayer at the beginning that everyone would stand up and they would say together. And at some point in it, they would say, moja wina, moja bardzo wielka wina. Now, it's kind of hard to translate it, but what they're saying is, it's my fault, my very big fault. And they're talking about the crucifixion of Jesus on the cross. And they're right about that. They may be wrong about many other things, but they're right about that. How deep is your love for Jesus? Is it deep enough to discipline yourself, to control yourself, and stop sinning? Is it? See, but Ron, how can we stop sinning? No one can stop sinning. This is a lie in the apostate church that does not bear up under the scriptures. Jesus said at least twice to two different people to stop sinning. Paul said to stop sinning. John said to stop sinning. And Peter said to stop sinning. And he's quoting God, along with two Old Testament references that are also quoting God, saying the same thing. You cannot get around it. Jesus said to the woman caught in adultery, who he showed mercy on and saved from being stoned to death, is neither do I accuse you, only go and sin no more. To the man who suffered of a 35-year-old infirmity, he said, stop sinning or something worse may happen. Paul said, awake to righteousness and do not sin. For some do not have the knowledge of God. I say this to your shame. John said, I write this to you, dear children, so that you may not sin. And Peter, and in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, quoting God, be holy, because I, your God, am holy. There's no way around it. You must stop sinning. And you know that you can, because Paul says in 1 Corinthians, He says, verse 13, verse 12, wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. So if you think that you're standing, you've got to be cautious lest you, or else you may fall. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as common to man. The only temptations that can take hold of you are those that are common among other people. It's not unique to you. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able. He will not allow any temptation to come on you that is more than what you're able to handle, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape. You know what that says? With the temptation, he will also provide a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it, that you may be able to hold up under the temptation. Meaning there's no temptation too great that you cannot hold up under it. And Jacob, aka James, says the same thing when he says that no one who's being pierced should say that God is piercing me to separate me from fellowship. But each person is pierced when by his own wicked desires he's overtaken. Temptation comes from inside us. Piercing is temptation. That's the actual word in Greek. Temptation comes from inside us. And therefore, it's not bigger than us. It's part of us. A part of us is not equal to the whole. Therefore, it is smaller than us. Every temptation is smaller than us. Every temptation can be controlled by you. It's your temptation. It's part of you. God designed it that way so that there can be no temptation that's too big for you to handle. So now my question again is, how much do you love Jesus Christ? Because if you love Jesus Christ, you will stop sinning. It's not a matter of boasting. Not at all. Not at all. It's a matter of calling you to holiness. The kingdom of God is at hand. Will you enter into it and stand in it? Or will you be shut out? About the New Jerusalem, it describes the gates, 12 gates. Every one of them is a giant pearl. And you go through this. And inside is an angel, like the angel at the Garden of Eden who guarded it, so that nothing unclean may enter into its gates. Do you love Jesus? Will you enter the kingdom of God, or will you be shut out by the angels guarding the gates to the city? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, your fortitude. And may the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.